I worked 2 jobs to put my daughter through college. Then she said I wasn't classy enough for her wedding, so I canceled the reception I was paying for. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories of women who refuse to be erased. The call came on a Tuesday evening, right as I was soaking my feet after a double shift. 24 years of working 2 jobs had left my body with permanent reminders: calloused hands, varicose veins, and a back that protested every morning. "Mama, he proposed!" Zoe's voice exploded through the phone, high and breathless like when she was a little girl. My baby girl, now Dr. Zoe Johnson, was engaged. I pressed the phone closer, picturing her face, those same bright eyes she got from her daddy, that wide smile that could light up rooms. Blake got down on one knee at the hospital garden. "The ring is, Mama, it's beautiful." "That's wonderful, baby," I said, swallowing down the immediate question. Did his folks know? Did they know she came from the east side of Savannah? That her mama cleaned their friends' houses on weekends? "Tell me about his people," I said instead, keeping my voice neutral. "You met his parents proper yet?" The silence stretched just a beat too long. "They're nice, Mama. His dad's chief of surgery at Massachusetts General, old money from Connecticut. And they know who you are? Where you come from?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Another pause. "They know what they need to know," she said, her voice dropping. "Listen, they have certain expectations about the wedding." I sat up straighter, phone gripped tight. "What kind of expectations?" "Just traditional things. Blake's sister had this gorgeous wedding at their summer house in Martha's Vineyard, and his mother thinks..." "His mother thinks what?" My voice had that edge now, the one my kids knew meant trouble. "Mama, please, can we just be happy about this?" I softened, remembering the day I dropped her at college. How terrified she'd been, how determined. The nights I'd scrubbed floors while she studied anatomy, both of us fighting for her future in different ways. "I am happy, baby. Just..." I took a breath. "Never forget who you are and what we went through to get you where you are. You earned your place at that hospital. You don't need to prove nothing to nobody." "It's not like that," she said, but I heard it, that slight defensive edge. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, photos of my 3 children watching me from the wall. Michael, my oldest, now teaching history at Morehouse. Layla, managing a community bank in Atlanta. And Zoe, my baby, the one who'd dreamed biggest. The one who'd looked at me at 14 and promised, "Mama, one day you won't have to clean nobody's house but your own." I'd worn my fingers to the bone making their dreams come true after Marcus walked out. 24 years of doubles at the hospital, weekends scrubbing floors, holidays missed because time and a half meant Christmas presents under the tree. And now my baby was marrying into a world that people like us usually only saw from the service entrance. I touched the worn leather of my nursing shoes. "Just be careful, baby girl," I whispered to the empty room. "Some doors, once you walk through them, lock behind you." Boston in October was all red leaves and old money. The cab pulled up to the Thompson estate. I couldn't call it just a house, and I smoothed down my dress. I'd spent more than I should on this outfit. A deep purple wrap dress with a pattern inspired by kente cloth, gold earrings my grandmother left me, hair freshly braided in a crown. "You don't need to impress these people," Michael had said during our call last night. "This isn't about impressing nobody," I'd replied. "It's about showing my daughter I belong wherever she is." The door opened before I could knock. Margaret Thompson stood there, blonde hair swept into what my mama would have called rich lady hair, pearls gleaming at her throat. "Eleanor, finally we meet." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as they swept over me, cataloging, assessing. "What an interesting dress." "Thank you," I said, stepping inside like I belonged there. "It's inspired by traditional West African textiles." Richard Thompson appeared, tall and silver-haired. "Ah, the nurse mother," he said, offering a limp handshake. "Zoe's told us about your dedicated work ethic." The way he said nurse made it sound like maid. Zoe appeared then, rushing forward to hug me. But something was different. Her hair was straightened flat, her accent carefully neutral. None of the Savannah warmth that usually colored her words. "Mama, you made it," she said, but her eyes darted nervously between me and the Thompsons. During dinner, Margaret dominated the conversation. interrupting me 3 times. "So you're still working 2 jobs?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "At your age? How dedicated." "When you raise 3 children alone, you do what's necessary," I replied evenly. "My children were worth every sacrifice." "Yes, but surely now that they're grown," Margaret started. "My mother put 3 children through college on her own," I continued, not letting her finish. "My son has a PhD. My oldest daughter runs a community bank, and Zoe will be an incredible doctor. I'd say my work ethic served us well." Richard cleared his throat. "Speaking of work, Blake's just been offered a partnership track." As they discussed Blake's career, I noticed Zoe barely touched her food. When she spoke, her voice had changed, higher, with rounder vowels, nothing like the girl who used to belt gospel songs in our kitchen. "The neighborhood where you live," Margaret said later, wine glass dangling from her fingers, "isn't that where there was that dreadful shooting last year?" "My neighborhood may not have security gates," I replied, "but we have something better. People who look out for each other. When I had pneumonia 3 years ago, my neighbors took turns bringing food for a month." In the car back to my hotel, I finally asked Zoe the question burning in my throat. "Do they always talk to people like they're applying for a job they're not qualified for?" Zoe stared out the window. "They're just traditional. Things will get better when everyone knows each other better. Baby girl, people show you who they are right from the start. Question is whether you're seeing it." Her phone buzzed with a text. "It's Blake," she said, relief flooding her voice. "He wants to know how dinner went." "And what are you going to tell him?" She hesitated. "That it went fine." I let the lie sit between us all the way back to the hotel. Over the next months, I watched my daughter disappear through a screen. Our weekly video calls became a catalog of small erasures. First, her hair, pressed straight, the natural curls I'd conditioned and oiled through her childhood, flattened into submission. Then her voice, the soft Savannah rhythm replaced with clipped, precise syllables that reminded me of Margaret. Then her laugh, once a full-throated thing that took up space, now a controlled, quiet chuckle. "You sound like you're catching a cold," I said during one call. "Your voice is different." She touched her throat self-consciously. "Oh, it's just, my accent wasn't working well in certain professional settings. The way your mama taught you to speak wasn't working?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's not what I meant," she backpedaled. "I'm just adapting to my environment." "Adaptation is different from erasure, Zoe." She changed the subject, talking about wedding venues the Thompsons had suggested. I noticed she never asked for my input. Later that week, I got a group video call invitation. The Thompsons wanted to discuss wedding plans. On screen, Margaret dominated the conversation. Richard nodded importantly, and Blake looked increasingly uncomfortable. "We thought the Westbrook Club for the reception," Margaret announced. "It's where all the medical staff hold their important functions." "What about that garden venue Zoe loved in her undergrad years?" I suggested. "The one with the fountain where you took graduation photos?" Margaret's smile tightened. "Eleanor, dear, I think we should leave these decisions to those more familiar with events of this caliber." I sat up straighter. "Actually, I have several ideas I'd like to share, considering I've known my daughter for 29 years. The call grew tense. Zoe's eyes darted between me and Margaret, panic rising. "Mama," she cut in, "the Westbrook is perfect. Really." After the call, my phone dinged with a text from Blake. "I'm sorry about my mother. She can be controlling. Your ideas matter too." I stared at the message, surprised. So he noticed. But if he noticed, why didn't he speak up? That night, Michael called. "How's it going with the wedding monster-in-law?" "Your sister's changing," I said instead of answering. "She's becoming someone I don't recognize. Layla and I were talking about that. Last time we spoke, she corrected my grammar. My grammar. I teach English literature." I sighed heavily. "I'm losing her, Michael. These people are stealing her?" he finished. "No," I said after a moment. "She's giving herself away, piece by piece, and I don't know how to stop it." The next morning, I found myself looking at old photos, Zoe at her high school graduation, crown of natural curls gleaming in the sun, laughing with her mouth wide open, unafraid to take up space in the world. I touched the image, wondering when my daughter had started believing she wasn't enough just as she was. The doorbell rang at 8 a.m. on a Saturday, my first day off in 2 weeks. I opened it to find Zoe on my doorstep, looking exhausted but immaculately dressed in clothes I didn't recognize. "Surprise!" She attempted brightness, but I saw the strain around her eyes. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in her scent, different now, some expensive perfume instead of the cocoa butter she'd used since childhood. You should have told me you were coming. I would have taken the weekend off. It was last minute, she said, setting down a sleek suitcase. I needed home. Something in my chest loosened at that word. Maybe my real daughter was still in there somewhere. By noon, Michael and Layla had both arrived, creating a rare family reunion. We ordered from our favorite soul food place, and for a while, it felt like old times. Michael telling outrageous stories about his students, Layla mimicking her uptight boss, but Zoe kept checking her phone, her smile growing more strained with each notification. Everything okay? I finally asked when Michael and Layla went for groceries. Margaret's texting about centerpieces. She sighed, then straightened. Actually, Mama, there's something I need to discuss with you. My stomach tightened at her formal tone. The Thompsons have generously offered to cover most of the wedding costs, she began, sounding like she was presenting a case. But traditionally, the bride's family handles the reception. I waited, already seeing where this was heading. They're expecting us to contribute. She swallowed. $25,000. The amount hit me like a physical blow. 25,000? Zoe, I know it's a lot, she rushed on, but it's actually a good deal considering the venue and that's more than I make in a year at the hospital, I cut in. Where exactly do they think this money's coming from? She couldn't meet my eyes. I mentioned Grandma's land. Maybe a small loan against it? Heat rose to my face. That land is my retirement security. The only thing I have to my name after working my fingers to the bone for 30 years. It wouldn't be the whole property, she pleaded. And this is my only chance for the wedding I've always dreamed of. After everything you've done to help me succeed, this is the only thing I'm asking for myself. The only thing. My voice rose. I put you through pre-med and medical school. I worked weekends scrubbing toilets so you wouldn't have student loans. And I'm grateful, but this is important to me. To be accepted by Blake's family. To have a wedding that reflects who I am now. Who you are now, I repeated slowly. And who exactly is that, Zoe? The door opened before she could answer. Michael and Layla froze in the doorway, grocery bags in hand. What's going on? Layla asked. When Zoe explained, Michael's face darkened. Absolutely not. These people are using you, Zoe. Can't you see that? Nobody's using me, Zoe snapped. This is my choice, my future. A future where your own mother has to bankrupt herself to buy you a seat at their table? Layla countered. The argument escalated until Zoe grabbed her suitcase. I shouldn't have come, she said, tears streaming. None of you understand what's at stake. As the door slammed behind her, I sat heavily on the couch, wondering when the daughter I raised had started seeing her own family as an obstacle to overcome. The financial advisor shook his head firmly. Ms. Johnson, I strongly advise against leveraging your grandmother's land. At your age, with retirement approaching, this property is your most valuable asset. I nodded, already knowing this, but needing to hear it confirmed. And if I took out a smaller loan? Just enough for the reception? He pushed his glasses up. You'd be taking on debt at a time when you should be eliminating it. What's driving this decision, if you don't mind me asking? I didn't tell him about Zoe's transformation, about the Thompsons' subtle condescension, about my fear of losing my daughter completely if I refused. Instead, I said, sometimes being a parent means making hard choices. The lawyer I consulted next was more pragmatic. If you proceed, we'll draw up an agreement stating exactly what the money is for. It protects both parties. On my way home, I stopped to check my mailbox and found an official-looking envelope from Pearson & Associates, my mother's estate lawyers. Inside was a brief note requesting I come collect some personal documents found among her things. Mom had passed 6 months ago, and I thought we'd sorted everything. I tucked the letter into my purse, too exhausted after my double shift to deal with it now. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator, working through options. Even with a partial loan against the property, I'd be working double shifts well into my 60s. My phone lit up with a message from Zoe. Have you thought about what we discussed? I closed my eyes, remembering her as a 7-year-old, proudly showing me an A+ on her science test. At 16, receiving her first college acceptance letter. At 22, white coat ceremony, tears in her eyes as she whispered, "This is because of you, Mama." Against every practical consideration, I decided to help her. Not by selling the land, I wasn't that foolish, but by taking a partial loan against it. I'd make it work somehow. I always had. I called Zoe the next morning. I'll contribute to the reception, I said, but with conditions. I want a written agreement that this money is specifically for the reception, and I want input on the planning. Her relief was palpable. Of course, Mama. Thank you. I promise you won't regret this. But in the weeks that followed, my input was systematically ignored. Calls about menu options happened when I was on shift. Venue visits were scheduled when I couldn't possibly make it to Boston. When I finally managed to arrange time off for a dress fitting, Margaret spent the entire session making subtle comments about my unique taste. Perhaps something more conventional would be better suited for the mother of the bride, she suggested, eyeing my preferred deep purple dress with distaste. Blake, who had stopped by to drive us to lunch, frowned slightly. I think Eleanor would look beautiful in that color, he said, surprising everyone. Margaret's smile tightened. Of course, but there are certain traditions to consider. As we left, Blake quietly said to me, I'm sorry about that. My mother can be set in her ways. I studied his face, genuinely apologetic, obviously uncomfortable with the dynamics at play. A small ray of hope appeared. Maybe my future son-in-law wasn't completely under his family's thumb after all. You don't have to do this, Michael insisted as our plane descended into Boston. We can still turn around. I'm not letting her face these people alone, I replied, adjusting my blazer. New, purchased with overtime pay. Besides, this meeting is about cultural elements in the ceremony. If I don't fight for our family's heritage, who will? Layla squeezed my hand. We've got your back, Mama. The Thompson estate looked even more imposing in spring. Gardens meticulously maintained by people who probably looked like me. Zoe met us at the door, her smile tight with anxiety. Thank you for coming, she said, hugging us mechanically. Everyone's in the sunroom. The everyone turned out to be the entire Thompson clan, Richard and Margaret, Blake's sister Victoria, and her husband, 2 aunts, an uncle, and a wedding planner who looked like she'd stepped from a magazine cover. Now that everyone's here, Margaret began before we'd barely sat down, let's discuss the ceremony traditions. I cleared my throat. I've brought some ideas for incorporating Johnson family traditions. In our family, the jumping of the broom symbolizes— Oh, how ethnic, Margaret interrupted. But we've already planned a very traditional Episcopalian ceremony. The broom ceremony is traditional, Layla countered. It dates back generations in Black American weddings. Victoria sipped her mimosa. I understand you want to contribute, but there are certain expectations for weddings in our circle. The tension in the room thickened. Blake shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Zoe stared at her hands. Perhaps, I suggested evenly, we could incorporate elements from both families' traditions. After all, marriage is about bringing 2 worlds together. Richard waved this away. Let's be practical. The ceremony will be at St. Mark's, as it has been for Thompson weddings for generations. The discussion moved to education when Richard's brother asked what schools my other children attended. Michael teaches at Morehouse after getting his PhD from Howard, I said proudly. Layla graduated from Spelman. Historically Black colleges, the uncle nodded condescendingly. Remarkable how some people overcome their circumstances. Michael straightened. I chose Howard because of its academic excellence and legacy, not to overcome anything. An uncomfortable silence fell. Blake finally spoke up. I apologize for my uncle's comment. It was inappropriate. But Zoe, instead of supporting her brother, touched Michael's arm nervously. Let's not cause a scene, she whispered. During a break, I overheard Zoe talking with Victoria in the kitchen. They mean well, Victoria was saying. But do they always have to be so loud? I know, Zoe responded, voice low. It's embarrassing sometimes. They don't understand how things work in our world. Must be hard coming from such simple backgrounds. My heart stopped when Zoe laughed softly. You have no idea. I stepped into view and Zoe's face drained of color. Later, alone in Zoe's apartment, I confronted her. Is that how you see us now? Simple? Embarrassing? You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she exploded. Do you know how hard I've worked to be taken seriously here? To fit in? Fit in? Or disappear? I asked quietly. Maybe you're just not sophisticated enough for this. The words burst out of her. I've worked so hard to get where I am, to be accepted in this world. I stepped back like she'd slapped me. If this is the world you've chosen, where you need to reject your own mother to be accepted, then maybe I don't belong in it. The taxi ride back to our hotel was silent, the gulf between us wider than ever. The law office was housed in a converted Victorian in downtown Savannah. Inside, Mr. Pearson handed me a weathered cardboard box. "These were among your mother's personal effects," he explained. "She left specific instructions that they be given to you after her passing." I thanked him and took the box home. Setting it on my kitchen table, the label read simply, "For Eleanor, Marcus Matters." My hands trembled as I cut the tape. Inside were dozens of envelopes, all addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen in 24 years. Marcus's handwriting. I sank into a chair, pulse thundering in my ears. The postmarks spanned years, starting 3 years after he'd walked out on us. Letters my mother had obviously intercepted and hidden. With shaking fingers, I opened the earliest one. "Dear Eleanor," it began. "I know I have no right to contact you after what I did, but I need you to know how sorry I am. The kids must be so big now. Michael starting high school, Layla in middle school, little Zoe probably talking everyone's ear off." Tears blurred my vision. I opened another, dated 5 years after he left. "I've been sending money to your mother's address, hoping she's passing it on to you and the kids. I know it doesn't make up for my absence, but I want to help with their education." My head snapped up. Money? I'd never received a penny. I dug deeper into the box and found bank statements and legal documents. Marcus had been making regular deposits to an account I knew nothing about. And there was something else, a life insurance policy naming me and the children as beneficiaries. The most recent letters revealed Marcus had died of a heart attack 5 years ago. The insurance company had contacted my mother as the emergency contact on file. The final item in the box was an unsent letter from my mother to me. "Eleanor," she'd written, "Marcus doesn't deserve forgiveness after abandoning you all. And you don't need his money. You've proven you can provide for those children all on your own. I'm proud of how strong you've become without him." I sat amid the scattered letters, a lifetime of lies unraveling around me. My mother's pride had kept us struggling when help had been available. Her resentment had denied us all closure. I called Michael and Layla immediately. When they arrived and saw the evidence, their shock mirrored mine. "According to these documents," Michael said, examining the insurance policy, "with interest there should be over $100,000. $100,000? Layla whispered. I thought of the extra shifts, the weekends cleaning houses, the vacations never taken, the retirement constantly delayed. All this time," I said, voice hollow, "we could have had help." But beneath the anger, something else stirred. Understanding. My mother's actions, though misguided, came from love and pride. She'd wanted to protect us from a man who'd hurt us once, just as I now wanted to protect Zoe from people who didn't value her true self. I've been making the same mistake, I realized aloud, letting pride and hurt drive my decisions about Zoe. "What are you going to do?" Layla asked. I looked at the scattered evidence of how destructive pride could be. "I'm going to fight for my daughter," I said. "Not against her, for her." Over the next weeks, we executed our plan methodically. First, we contacted the insurance company, providing death certificates and policy information. They confirmed the policy was valid and payable. Next, I called my old friend Gwendolyn, a professor of African American Studies at Emory University. She'd always moved effortlessly between worlds, respected in academia, yet deeply rooted in our community. "Eleanor Johnson, as I live and breathe," she exclaimed. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" I explained the situation with Zoe, the Thompsons, and my determination to fight for my daughter without surrendering my dignity. "So you want to beat these people at their own game?" Gwendolyn asked. "Not exactly," I replied. "I want to show my daughter she doesn't have to choose between worlds, that her heritage is an asset, not a liability." Gwendolyn agreed to help. We started with weekly discussions about African American art, literature, and history. Not subjects new to me, but ones I'd never had time to study deeply. "This isn't about becoming someone you're not," Gwendolyn reminded me during one session. "It's about articulating who you've always been." Meanwhile, Michael and Layla investigated the Thompsons. Through contacts in Boston's medical community, they discovered Richard had made several failed investments, explaining the family's insistence on our financial contribution despite their apparent wealth. As for my relationship with Zoe, things remained strained. Our calls were brief and formal, but Blake reached out several times, increasingly troubled by the distance between Zoe and her family. "I never wanted this," he confessed during one call. I fell in love with Zoe because she was different from the women I grew up around, passionate, authentic, proud of her background. And now? I asked. He sighed heavily. Now I'm watching her become someone else. Someone who laughs at jokes that aren't funny, who apologizes for things that need no apology. This conversation strengthened my resolve. I wasn't fighting just for my relationship with my daughter, but for her relationship with herself. I didn't undergo a miraculous transformation during those months. No makeover montage, no sudden expertise in wine pairings or art history. Instead, I committed to something more sustainable, learning to articulate my existing values and experiences with confidence. When Margaret interrupted me, I would say firmly, I wasn't finished speaking. When Richard made assumptions about my knowledge, I'd correct him politely but firmly. I practiced speaking with purpose, standing my ground without apology, and most importantly, refusing to be rushed or intimidated. The key, Gwendolyn advised, is to recognize that their so-called sophistication is mostly just confidence born of privilege. Your experiences, raising 3 successful children alone, navigating systems not designed for you, building community, those require more sophistication than picking the right fork. The night before the engagement party, Michael, Layla, and I reviewed our approach. Remember, Michael said, this isn't about winning their approval. It's about showing Zoe she doesn't have to choose, I finished, that she can have both worlds without sacrificing either. Layla squeezed my hand. You ready, Mama? I thought of the little girl who used to climb into my lap after nightmares, seeking safety. The teenager who defied odds to become a doctor. My daughter, who was losing herself in pursuit of acceptance. More than ready, I replied. It's time to bring our girl home. The Boston Yacht Club gleamed with old money and new crystal. I entered flanked by Michael and Layla, chin high, back straight. My dress, a custom creation in midnight blue with subtle Kente cloth accents, made a statement without shouting. Margaret spotted us immediately, her smile freezing momentarily before recovering. Eleanor, how unexpected to see you all so early. The invitation said 7, I replied pleasantly. It's exactly 7. Richard approached, cocktail in hand. Ah, the Johnson crew arrives en masse. Family supports family, Michael replied smoothly. Isn't that what tonight is celebrating? Zoe hurried over, looking both relieved and anxious. You all look amazing, she said, embracing us, though her eyes darted nervously to the Thompsons. You too, baby, I said, noting how she'd straightened her hair again. Throughout the evening, I implemented our strategy. When Margaret attempted to steer me toward the background during photos, I simply said, as mother of the bride, I believe my place is beside my daughter, and maintained my position. When Richard interrupted my conversation about the exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts, I calmly continued, as I was saying, the Basquiat retrospective powerfully illustrates how he navigated between worlds without compromising his identity. He blinked, clearly surprised by my knowledge of an artist he'd assumed I wouldn't recognize. You've seen the exhibition? Victoria asked, skepticism evident. Not yet, I replied truthfully. But I've studied his work extensively. His ability to critique power structures while participating in them resonates with my experience. The conversation shifted, with several guests genuinely engaging with me about art and representation. I noticed Zoe watching these interactions, confusion and something like pride battling on her face. During dinner, when Margaret mentioned family traditions, I shared the story of my grandmother's wedding quilt. She stitched symbols representing strength and endurance, qualities that sustained our family through centuries of struggle. Each generation adds a new panel. Zoe's is waiting for her when she's ready. The table fell silent, the simple eloquence of the tradition impossible to dismiss. Later, I approached the catering manager, introducing myself. I'm Eleanor Johnson, paying for the reception portion of the upcoming wedding. His eyebrows rose slightly. Yes, Mrs. Thompson mentioned you'd be contributing. I'd like to review the contract and discuss some modifications to the menu, I said, handing him my card. Nothing that would disrupt the overall plan, but I'd like to incorporate some dishes significant to our family heritage. Of course, he replied professionally. I'm happy to work directly with you on those elements. As the party wound down, I noticed Blake watching me with newfound respect. Zoe approached, her expression unreadable. You've changed, she said quietly. No, baby, I corrected her. I've always been this woman. I just never had time to show her to the world when I was busy raising you three and paying bills." She looked away, uncomfortable with this truth. "The real question," I continued gently, "is whether you recognize the woman you're becoming." Before she could answer, Margaret swooped in to pull her away for final photos, but the seed had been planted. As we left, Blake approached me. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said sincerely. "It meant a lot, to both of us." I studied his face. "Does it? To both of you?" He hesitated. "I hope after the wedding, we can all find a better way forward." "The wedding is still 2 months away," I reminded him. "That's plenty of time for truth to surface." "I didn't expect to be sitting in your kitchen in Savannah," Blake said, accepting the coffee I offered. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." I studied my future son-in-law as he sat at my modest kitchen table. Without his family's influence, he seemed younger, more genuine. When someone flies 1,000 miles for a conversation, it must be important, I replied, sitting across from him. He turned the mug in his hands. "I'm worried about Zoe. Join the club." "I fell in love with her because she was different," he continued. "Brilliant, yes, but also passionate, authentic. She challenged me, made me question assumptions I'd grown up with. And now?" His shoulders slumped. "Now she's turning into someone else. Someone who agrees with everything my mother says, who changes her opinions depending on who's in the room." I let the silence stretch, giving him space to continue. "Last week, one of our colleagues made a comment about people from certain backgrounds not understanding medical protocols. 2 years ago, Zoe would have called it out immediately. Instead, she laughed along. My heart ached. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think I'm losing her, and I think you're the only one who might be able to help." I considered his words carefully. "Did you know that Zoe's father tried to reconnect with us years after he left? That he sent money to help with their education?" Blake looked confused by this apparent change of subject. "No, she never mentioned." "Because she didn't know," I explained, sharing the discovery of the letters and insurance policy. "My mother's pride and hurt kept that truth from us for decades. She thought she was protecting us, but she was actually denying us choice and closure." Understanding dawned on his face. "And you see the same pattern happening now." "Pride and fear are powerful forces," I said. "They can make us reject help, deny our past, even change who we are." "What should I do?" he asked. "Have an honest conversation with my daughter. Ask her if she's happy becoming someone who laughs at jokes that demean her own background." He nodded slowly. "And the wedding?" "That depends on which Zoe shows up to the altar. The woman you fell in love with, or the woman my future in-laws are trying to create." After Blake left, I received a call from the catering manager in Boston. He sounded uncomfortable. "Mrs. Johnson, there seems to be some confusion. Mrs. Thompson called insisting that all menu modifications must be approved by her, claiming you don't have authority to make changes." "Is that so?" I replied calmly. "Please check your contract. You'll find that as the party paying for the reception, I have final approval on all reception details." "I did verify that," he confirmed, "but Mrs. Thompson was quite insistent." "I understand. Please email me the current menu and I'll send my approved modifications by tomorrow." Within an hour, my phone exploded with Zoe's call. "How could you go behind my back like this?" she demanded, voice shaking with anger. "I didn't go behind anyone's back," I replied evenly. "The agreement was clear. My money, my input." "You're embarrassing me. Margaret says—" "I don't care what Margaret says," I cut in. "I care what you say. Tell me, Zoe, do you really want a reception where your own heritage is erased, where the food could be served at any generic country club wedding?" "You don't understand. This is about fitting in, about starting my new life. By rejecting your old one? By rejecting me?" The silence spoke volumes. "The shame isn't in honoring your roots, Zoe," I said finally. "It's in denying them. It's time to decide who you really want to be." The rain fell steadily as our cab pulled up to the Four Seasons for the rehearsal dinner. Michael adjusted his tie while Layla checked her lipstick. "Remember," I told them both, "tonight isn't about confrontation. It's about standing our ground with dignity." Inside, the private dining room gleamed with crystal and old money. The Thompsons had spared no expense, a pointed reminder of the world Zoe was marrying into. Margaret approached immediately, pearl necklace bobbing as she air-kissed my cheeks. "Eleanor, we were just discussing seating arrangements for tomorrow. We thought you might be more comfortable in the second row to maintain visual balance." I smiled pleasantly. As the mother who raised the bride single-handedly, My place is in the first row, watching my daughter begin her new life. Richard appeared at his wife's elbow. There are traditions to consider, he muttered. The tradition I value most is respect, Blake interjected, surprising everyone as he joined our circle. And Eleanor deserves our utmost respect. Margaret's smile tightened to a grimace. Richard cleared his throat and wandered toward the bar. Throughout dinner, I noticed Blake watching Zoe intently as she navigated the room. She was playing her role perfectly, laughing at the right moments, deferring to Margaret's opinions, keeping her voice modulated. But twice I caught her looking at me across the room, something like confusion in her eyes. After dessert, Richard tapped his glass for attention. Tomorrow, we celebrate the union of two exceptional young people from fine families, he announced, his gaze skipping over our side of the room. The Thompsons welcome Zoe into our long tradition of excellence. I felt Michael tense beside me, but I touched his arm gently. Not now. As the evening wound down, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Can you come an hour later tomorrow morning? The Thompsons want some family photos first. I showed Michael and Layla, who exchanged worried glances. She's still trying to compartmentalize her worlds, Layla observed. I thought for a moment, then texted Blake, we need to talk, now. 10 minutes later, we gathered in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. Me, Michael, Layla, and Blake. Zoe just asked me to come late tomorrow so your family can take photos without us, I told Blake directly. His face fell. I knew nothing about this. Do you understand what's happening? Michael pressed. Your family is systematically trying to erase ours from this wedding, from Zoe's life. Blake ran a hand through his hair. I've tried talking to her. Last week we had a huge fight about it. She insists she's just trying to make everyone happy. By making herself disappear? Layla asked. I made my decision then. I'm calling the catering company, I announced, pulling out my phone. Mama, what are you doing? Michael asked. Not canceling, I assured them. Rescheduling. The reception will start 2 hours later than planned. Blake looked alarmed. Why? Because tomorrow, after the ceremony, we're going to have an honest family conversation. All of us. Before anyone poses for happy photos or makes celebratory speeches. I made the call, using my authority as the contract holder to adjust the timing, citing a family emergency. When I finished, Blake was watching me with newfound respect. Should I tell Zoe? He asked. No, I replied. Sometimes people need to be confronted with the truth all at once, before they can rebuild their defenses. The next morning, I arrived at the church precisely on time. Not early, not late. Margaret and Zoe were in the bridal suite, both looking shocked at my punctual appearance. I thought you were coming later, Zoe said, panic in her eyes. Why would I miss a moment of my daughter's wedding day? I asked simply. Margaret made excuses and left quickly. Alone with my daughter, I took her hands in mine. I didn't come to cause problems, I told her quietly. I came because I love you, and because before you walk toward your future, we need to heal your past. The church side room was never meant to hold this many people, but none of us moved as the truth finally unfolded. I discovered something recently, I began, addressing both families. My mother intercepted letters and money from my children's father for years, believing her pride was more important than our needs. I turned to Zoe, whose eyes were wide with shock at this revelation. That discovery made me realize I was watching the same pattern with you, baby girl. You're allowing shame and the desire for acceptance to separate you from who you really are. Margaret started to interrupt, but Blake silenced her with a raised hand. My own mother's actions taught me how destructive pride can be, I continued. It kept us struggling when help was available. It denied my children a chance to know their father had regretted leaving. And now I'm watching my daughter erase herself to gain approval from people who haven't earned the right to change her. Richard shifted uncomfortably. This is hardly the time. It's exactly the time, Blake cut in. Before we make vows, we need truth. Zoe stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. I didn't raise you to be ashamed of where you come from, I told her gently. I raised you to carry your heritage proudly into whatever rooms you enter. It wasn't that simple, she whispered. You don't know what it's like, trying to be taken seriously when everyone sees you as an outsider. Don't I challenged. I've been the only black nurse on my floor for 15 years, the only single mother in PTA meetings, the cleaning lady in houses where people talked about me like I was furniture. Blake moved to Zoe's side. I fell in love with you because you were unapologetically yourself, he said. Lately, I've been watching you disappear, and it terrifies me." Margaret made a dismissive sound. "This is unnecessarily dramatic. Zoe is simply adapting to her new circumstances. By straightening her hair, changing her accent, laughing at jokes that demean her own background," Michael challenged. Zoe's shoulders began to shake with sobs. "I just wanted to belong," she managed, "to not always be fighting, explaining, justifying." "Oh, baby." I moved to her, pulling her into my arms like when she was small. "The right people will love you without requiring you to become someone else first." Blake knelt beside us. "I want to marry the real Zoe Johnson, the one who called out my ignorant assumptions on our first date, the one who was proud of her mother working 2 jobs to put her through school." Through her tears, Zoe looked from Blake to me, then to the Thompsons, who were watching with expressions ranging from discomfort to genuine shame. "I don't know if I remember how to be her anymore," she admitted quietly. "She's still in there," I promised, "and we'll help you find her again." The ceremony was delayed an hour, but when it finally happened, it was transformed. Zoe walked down the aisle with her natural curls framing her face. She'd added a kente cloth sash to her gown, a last-minute addition that looked like it had always been meant to be there. During the vows, she surprised everyone by adding an unplanned dedication. "To my mother, who taught me that true strength comes from knowing who you are and standing firm in that knowledge." I lost sight of that lesson, but I promised to honor it from this day forward. The reception, though delayed, became a genuine celebration. The menu included both elegant offerings and dishes that honored our heritage. The Thompson family, chastened by the morning's revelations and perhaps by the discovery of our newfound financial security, made visible efforts to engage meaningfully with our side of the family. During the reception, I announced the creation of the Johnson Family Scholarship for Black medical students, funded by a portion of Marcus's insurance money. The rest would be divided among my children, with my share allowing me to finally reduce my workload to a single job. In the months that followed, healing came slowly but steadily. Zoe and Blake entered couples therapy to work through the identity issues that had nearly derailed their relationship. The Thompsons didn't transform overnight, but small steps were taken toward mutual respect. 6 months later, at Thanksgiving dinner, both families gathered at my home in Savannah. As we prepared to eat, Zoe pulled me aside. "Thank you for fighting for me," she whispered, hugging me tightly. Even when I was fighting against myself, I smiled, stroking her hair, natural again, styled in the twists she'd worn throughout college. "A mother never gives up," I told her. "She just finds new ways to love, even when it's hard." As we joined the others at the table, Michael and his new girlfriend, Layla, and her husband Blake, even Richard and Margaret making awkward but sincere efforts, I felt a sense of completion. The circle that began with my mother's misguided pride had finally been broken. My daughter had found her way back to herself, and I had learned that sometimes loving someone means fighting for them, not against them, even when they've temporarily lost sight of their own worth. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your journey might inspire another queen.